So action cameras have definitely come a long ways, and it's kind of crazy what we can get from these little things compared to real cameras. So we've got 4K recording, of course, but not only that, 8K in some cases, which is a bit nuts to think of coming from something this small. We've got nearly any shooting mode under the sun with like super slow-mo, there's time lapses, dedicated night modes, HDR, you name it, these probably have it. And the quality that we can actually get out of these little cameras is pretty amazing as well, where these get some really high quality and crispy footage that looks like it's coming out of a high dollar and much bigger real camera. Beyond that though is how far they've come in terms of innovation, where most action cameras have followed a pretty similar template over the years and honestly haven't really changed a whole lot. I think in many ways that could be a good thing since that template has worked in most cases, but after using some of the more popular action cameras side by side over the last few weeks, there's one that kind of sticks out when it comes to fresh ideas. So with this new Ace Pro 2, they've improved on the original in a lot of ways, and in this video we're going to talk about what makes this camera actually pro. I think there's many reasons to choose one camera over the other, whether you want the most features, maybe comparing specs and megapixels and stuff like that. And there's also image quality, of course. Everyone totally has their particular thing that they're looking for in an action camera. And while definitely talking about all the features, specs, and image quality and stuff like that in this video, I also really want to talk about the pure usability and ease of use, because that's a big factor with these kinds of cameras, is how quick and convenient it is to get the footage that we actually need. So first off, to get this out of the way, this is 100% not a sponsored video, where Insta360 did send this camera out for me to test and review, but all the opinions in this video are my own. They don't get a preview of this video before I publish it, and they're seeing it and hearing it for the first time just like you. So this video is really all about giving you a rundown of what's new versus the previous generation, and also how it compares at a high level from some of its competitors. But I'm also going to have a follow-up video with some super detailed comparisons of how they all perform in specific scenarios, so make sure to subscribe to get a notification when that video comes out. Okay, so first up, let's talk about the hardware itself. And this is where I think the Ace Pro 2 probably stands out from the crowd the most, where it does have that familiar look to an action camera, but there are some features here that you don't find on other cameras. So first off, we've got an upgraded 1/1.3-inch sensor that can get up to 8K footage. Again, kind of nuts out of a camera like this. And with the Ace Pro 2, they've upped the 8K recording capability to 30 frames per second versus 24 frames per second on the original Ace Pro. And along with that, they've also improved the dynamic range, where they've upgraded their active HDR mode to be able to record at 4K 60 versus 4K 30 from before. But when it comes to actually recording in 8K, well, not many of us are actually publishing in 8K, so it's not really about how the 8K footage looks specifically, I don't think. It's more about with that 8K, that allows for more flexibility in post, where if we want to use the 8K 30 recording mode, that's where we can punch into a particular section of the frame to get framing just how we'd like it without any loss of image quality if we're publishing in 4K. But the other advantage of 8K is that it allows for a digital zoom, where we can zoom in directly in the camera itself, which is something that can be done with other 4K cameras, but then there's going to be a loss in image quality. With this, we can zoom in and not have any loss in image quality if we're publishing in 4K. And while I definitely tested out the 8K recording, and I think the image quality looks good and there's really a lot of pixels to deal with, I actually used a more tried and true 4K mode. But not only that, I was also using their active HDR mode that can now be used at 4K 60 versus 4K 30 from the previous generation. And the quality of their active HDR footage is really some of the best mountain bike footage I've ever gotten from an action camera, where there's really a lot of dynamic range here, where there's tons of detail in both the highlights as well as the shadows. But not only that, I quite liked how the colors looked, where it's quite a bit more vibrant than what I usually get out of most action cameras. I usually have to do a bit of color grading after the fact with a lot of action camera footage, but this footage is really great straight out of the camera. And the stabilization that you can get nowadays is again pretty crazy here, where you can be going down some pretty crazy rough terrain at some high speeds, and this footage looks really, really smooth. Now, I do find though that if I was moving the camera around or changing angles, it wasn't quite as natural looking and smooth as I would have hoped, where it looked a little bit mechanical and not quite as smooth as it was actually in real life. And then when it comes to field of view, so this now has a slightly wider 157-degree field of view versus the 151 from before. So that's really quite a bit from a stock lens without even needing a wide-angle adapter. And then this also has a new dual-chip architecture inside, where using two different chipsets to handle different processing tasks. Like one handles more of the general processing, but then the other handles more advanced tasks like, let's say, noise reduction and image processing. And then that also kind of factors into low light performance. And this is where action cameras generally suffer a bit due to to their smaller sensor size. But they have some upgrades here as well, where they have this dedicated pure video mode that can now get up to 4K 60 versus 4K 30 from before. And they also claim that with a whole bunch of AI, it's supposed to handle noise reduction better as well as have better brightness in dark environments. And then when it comes to stills, so we can now get 50 megapixel photos out of this, which again is kind of crazy out of an action camera, which is a bump from the 48 megapixels on the previous generation. But shooting modes and specs aside, then there's the camera itself, where it has the flip-up rear display just like the previous generation, but they have actually upgraded this to a 2.5-inch display versus 2.4-inch from before, and they've also increased both the brightness as well as the pixel density. And this is arguably one of the most unique features of the Ace Pro 2 and the original Ace Pro for that matter versus the competitors that don't have this feature, which does make it quite a bit more versatile. So we've got front displays in all of the major action cameras nowadays, where with the DJI and the GoPro, these give us a preview of what we're shooting in selfie mode, but those displays can get a little bit clever too, since they're not only showing us the image preview, but also the shooting mode as well. So with the Ace Pro 2, they've got a dedicated front display just for the shooting mode, and then the flip-up display that gives us a bigger preview. Plus the fact that it allows for more flexible shooting options like all around, like you can actually see how footage can look if you, let's say, wanted to get a super low angle shot. Oh, and then one more rather interesting use for this display is that you can actually hang it on something that has an edge. That's kind of neat. Beyond that though, there's two other upgrades that they have on this next generation Ace Pro 2, where they first have this removable and replaceable lens guard in case you take a spill or something like that. But then there's also this little thing down here, which is a new wind guard that's supposed to help filter out wind with a little foam insert that they have that simply kind of snaps into place. So here's how it sounds with the wind guard on. Go ahead and turn it around, keep on talking. So the wind guard is pointed directly into the wind right now. I'm going to rotate it back, and let's go ahead and switch it out with a little dummy plate right here. And you're supposed to switch this out, especially in water, because it has a little bit of foam right behind it, right here. So here's how it sounds with just the regular old microphones without the wind guard. Go ahead and turn it around here as well. Keep on talking. And yeah, how's it sound to you? Oh, and then while we're talking about water, so they've also increased the water resistance to 39 feet versus 33 feet from before, but you can also go ahead and get a dive case if you want to go down to 60 meters. Oh, and then sorry, they've also added a dedicated underwater mode where it's supposed to automatically correct some of the distortion that you can get sometimes, and it's also supposed to optimize stabilization. And then on the battery life end of things, they've also increased the run time on the Ace Pro 2 versus the original, where the Ace Pro 2 now has a larger battery capacity from 1650 milliamp hours to 1800 milliamp hours. So they're now claiming up to 180 minutes of battery life. And if you need more than that, they also have a new endurance battery mode. So basically kind of like a battery saver mode, where they say that it can increase battery life by up to 50% more by lowering the level of stabilization, as well as like reducing the amount of wind noise reduction in both 4K 30 as well as 1080p 24. Oh, and then one last thing in regards to power is that they're now saying that you can get up to an 80% charge in just like 20 minutes or so, which I found to be pretty spot on. So when it comes to the upgrades from the previous generation, it really does have a ton, and the list kind of goes on, where they've also improved the minimum focus distance. There's a longer pre-recording time now, where that's up to 120 seconds of pre-recording versus 30 seconds from before. There's also a log color profile for more flexibility in color grading. There's now time code. There's new dash cam mode. They really have crammed a lot into this update, and this really is a pretty impressive camera all around. But when it comes to pro level features and performance, well, I think this is probably one of the most pro level action cameras that you can get, but that does come at a slight cost. And I'm not really talking about money though, because this does come in right around the same price as some of its direct competitors. The cost with the pro level features and quality is that it is a little bit bigger and heavier camera than some of its peers. Not like bigger and way heavier, but still bigger and heavier nonetheless, which can make a difference depending on your use case. And then the other thing to consider is the sheer amount of options that they have here too, where although their interface is laid out pretty well, there's simply a ton of modes to choose from here, where it does take some time to really learn what each one of these modes does and how they actually work. We really do have some great options to choose from now with flagship action cameras, and it is kind of astounding the quality of the footage that we can get out of these little things. And there may be a specific feature that you're looking for when it comes to an action camera, but I have to say that this does have a very well-rounded set of features that compares extremely well to competitors, but not only that, it does come with some fresher ideas, like let's say this flip-up display. And they do kind of lead with that whole 8K recording capability right on the box itself, but I'm not necessarily sure the majority of us will actually be recording in that 8K mode. I think most of us will probably be recording in more like a 4K 60 or 4K 120 mode. But where that 8K sensor comes into play is with that digital zoom, where you can punch in without any loss in image quality if you are going to be publishing in 4K, which does help differentiate the Ace Pro 2 from some of its competitors. So that's everything new with the new Ace Pro 2, but I definitely want to hear from you as well. So do you think you can upgrade from the original, and how do you think it actually competes with the DJI Action 5 Pro and the GoPro Hero 13 Black? Well, definitely let us all know down in the comments section down below. And on your way down there, if you found the information in this video useful, do me a favor and just quickly hit that like button down below. And also subscribe to the channel for lots more in-depth comparisons of the Ace Pro 2 versus some of its competitors that are coming soon. In the meantime, have fun out there, and we will see you in the next video.